Hello and welcome to Trib Talk. I'm Jennifer Napier-Pearce, executive editor of the Salt Lake Tribune. And last Saturday, Salt Lake City learned it is not immune to the pent-up frustration about racism and deadly police tactics that is sweeping the nation. Joining me to talk about the city's reaction to protesters, the coronavirus, the economy, so much more, is Salt Lake City Mayor Erin Mendenhall. And Mayor, thank you so much for carving out some time to talk with our listeners today.
Thanks for having me. I'm happy to have a chance to hear from the public and glad to be here with you.
We are going to take some questions on the hashtag Trib Talk. So if you've got something, throw it out there. We'll try and get to as many as we can. Mayor, you met with a group of Black Utahns last night for a listening session. What did you learn and what are you going to do?
Yeah, the police department coordinated the meeting with me, and I was grateful for everyone who turned out. The police department started by exhibiting what the restraint procedures are for Salt Lake City. They took an officer, put him on the ground, and showed how they restrain someone, what they do under circumstances where that person is resisting, what they do if the person says, I can't breathe in this position or that position, and what the process is from beginning to end. They asked a lot of, our guests asked many questions, which was the point of the experience. Everyone kind of filmed it, so I think you can probably find that footage out there, and as well as the police department. And then they evolved the discussion with there was a lot of gratitude for the way that Salt Lake City's procedures already are and the culture that Chief Brown and our police department strive to maintain, the way they police each other, what the system is in trying to predict before there's even an incident, the kind of behaviors that may indicate an officer needs to be pulled off of patrol or frontline duty, and had these hard conversations that were welcome. I expected, honestly, some criticism about anything about the policies that were out there, and we did provide all of those policies in writing, which are all publicly available anyway. But it became a broader discussion about how do Black people feel confident driving through from Salt Lake City down to Draper and all of the police jurisdictions that they may come in contact with anywhere in this country, and having no confidence that they will be treated fairly. We did a lot of listening, and I think a couple of the big takeaways that Dr. William Smith from the University of Utah suggested that Chief Brown do more regular and far-reaching educational opportunities to the public about what those restraint procedures are. And he compared it to Governor Cuomo in New York during his fireside chat kind of approach. However it might come through, I think that's a really fantastic idea, both to educate the public about the way we operate and to get feedback therein on what it is he's talking about. So we're the conversation that will continue.
I do think that, recognition that there is a problem leads to change. Does Salt Lake City Police Department have a problem?
I would not say that there is a problem of racism in Salt Lake City Police Department, but they are human beings. I make mistakes on a daily basis, and I think any police officer across the country would say, we're human and we make mistakes. What's important, and I'll point to the really sad and unacceptable, wholly unacceptable event that happened, which went national on the media, of the elderly gentleman being pushed down, dropping his cane and falling. And I think a sliver of the window into the culture of Salt Lake City Police Department can be seen in what happens immediately after, where the officers next to that officer come around him and help that person off the ground. And even the officer who did that reaches down and helps him get up. And I'm not trying to excuse it, and it doesn't justify it, but I think it's different from what you see in other cities that are all across the TV today, where officers might have just walked right over him and walked past him and left him there.
Is the officer being disciplined at all, Mayor?
Yeah, that investigation began immediately, and Chief Brown did an update on it on Sunday afternoon. But we could ask him what the process of the investigation is. I know that it is taking place right now.
Again, if you want to participate, hashtag Trib Talk is the way to do that. David from Facebook, why are you quelling peaceful demonstrations by local citizens by the use of police and military garb, using military vehicles and military weapons. I think that was a surprise for some Salt Lake City residents and others who were out on the streets to see the National Guard pulled into this. Talk us through that decision-making process.
I want to be clear that Salt Lake City does not prohibit and does not try to stymie peaceful demonstrations. And people are welcome to protest, have been welcome to protest peacefully between 6 a.m. and 8 p.m. during the time that this curfew has been in place. But I think what we saw on Saturday surprised everyone. And the level of escalation that happened when the police vehicle that was an officer who was en route on another call. Her vehicle was surrounded. She was able to get out, and you saw what happened from there, where they flipped the vehicle and lit it on fire. And that individual was, or the suspect in part of that, was arrested last night. But the way that escalated and the volume of escalation made it such that it would have been unsafe for Salt Lake City to send our police officers in by themselves. We did not have the staffing available to send in our officers and be able to keep the public safe and keep the officers safe. And at that point, I know that Police Chief Brown was in an emergency operations center, which frankly, since COVID and the earthquakes, we've been operating from an EOC standpoint for a long time, but was able to call on outside agencies. We had well more than a dozen agencies from across the city, and in coordination with the Department of Public Safety and the Governor's Office, the National Guard came in to assist. But I think it's important to note that this is really about keeping the public safe. And when officers go in understaffed and it goes bad, it goes bad for everyone. So we don't want the National Guard to have to remain on our streets. And Jennifer, the timing of this conversation is good. And I have something I didn't tell you before, but that I'm about to lift the curfew in Salt Lake City. We've seen the respect that the protesters have had for each other, for the police officers, for the property in Salt Lake City, and I think that our city is once again in a place where a place of peace and progress, and we've been wanting to be able to lift that curfew, and I'm about to sign that document in the next hour or so. So the curfew will be lifted, will not be put back in place at 8 p.m. tonight, and we hope. And we ask from the bottom of our hearts that peace that we saw, for the most part, with the crowd last night, be able to continue, and that the voice and the dialogue and the protest can peacefully continue in Salt Lake City.
A lot of people have been very critical of the curfew, the daytime curfew on Sunday, the extended curfew throughout the week. Those were a little more stringent that a lot of communities around the country, including Minneapolis and DC, have had experience with. I want to go to a question from, I believe it's Evelyn on Facebook. A week-long curfew seems like an overreaction that will escalate and inflame tension. Ask what the rationale was for it, especially because the rules carve out exceptions for basically all exercises of capitalism and seem specifically targeted at preventing free assembly outdoors. So again, we don't need to belabor this, but I think the decision-making process is pretty important because it does set a precedent for you and your administration.
That's right. And Salt Lake City put that in place as we looked at two things: the national climate, and of course, in consultation with other capital cities. I know that our police chief was in touch with those police chiefs in other cities that were experiencing some that had put curfews in place that lifted in the morning and saw an unwinding again, turning into violence by the afternoon and the evening. And so we were assessing the national climate and the decisions that were looking like what we were about to make and how they played out, and also local intelligence. We of course don't want to have a curfew in place, and we didn't want to impact our economy any more than it's been impacted by COVID. And in consultation with the governor's office, the Department of Public Safety, and our folks locally, we felt that it was safe and reasonable to allow people to travel to and from private businesses, even events on private property people could go to. But convening in a public space was the prohibition, obviously. And we were excited and anxious to be able to lift that, and I'm grateful to be able to tell you on this conversation that we are doing that. But I think it's worth noting, which came out in the paper, I think just today, perhaps late last night, about the media coverage that the protest on Sunday night and Monday, or Sunday afternoon, evening, and Monday nights, it's come out that Monday night in particular, there was what could have been a really awful tragedy prevented, thankfully, by the West Valley City Police, who'd been tracking intelligence on a person, a couple of people who had made threats against the West Valley City Police and Salt Lake City Police, and intercepted them on their way to the protest Monday night with an AK-47 with a silencer and an Uzi. And when they went back to their home, found many other weapons, but were bringing those weapons to the protest. There were shot fired. There were people with loaded weapons that ended up being arrested for smashing windows. There was the window smashed out of the military vehicle on Monday night. So it hasn't been peaceful since Saturday. I think there was a perception in an immediate fashion that there was, but this was the kind of intelligence that we were aware of and that was guiding our decision.
So to be clear, curfew has been lifted. What else needs to go into the minds of people who live in Salt Lake City, who work in Salt Lake City, who are protesting in Salt Lake City as they come and descend in the metro downtown area tonight?
Jennifer, I'm having some.
Are you able to hear me, Mayor?
Can't hear you, and it's paused for me.
It looks like we're having some technical difficulties. Sara, will you try and help the mayor out there?
I hear you now, Jennifer. Can you hear me now?
You hear me now? Okay, great.
Sara,
all
you
these
hear me?
technical things with the virtual environment, it's difficult.
Are we better?
Terrific. So I was just asking, to be clear,
Was
the curfew
about for people who want to come out still?
Yeah, so no curfew tonight, no curfew going forward. What are the other expectations that you are putting in place tonight?
Right. There's no restrictions in place tonight. It's normal city law, normal city policy. But of course, we are continuously evaluating, again, the national climate and local intelligence. We are still coordinating with state public safety officials to help us with that scale. And I know that the FBI was also involved in the West Valley City operation that was able to intercept those people coming to, seeming like they were coming to do some serious harm to the protesters or the police officers. So we will continue, obviously, with that. But so I urge people to, if you come out to protest, and we welcome peaceful protests. That's what Salt Lake City's Washington Square is partially there for. I think it's our front yard as a state, come together and have her there. But let's take care of each other. Let's make sure that these remain peaceful. And if you see something that is worrisome, it should be addressed. And there have been some cause for worry on every day over the last 4 or 5 days. So let's keep our eyes out, watching out for one another, and make sure it remains safe so that we can do the pause. Can you hear me?
Still having a little bit of technical difficulties, but I've got you now. This question from Rachel on Facebook. Mayor, would you be willing to join in these peaceful protests and give voice and support to people of color in Salt Lake City and Utah? Would you be willing to come and take a knee and lead by example? I had heard some criticism that you did not show up during the protests on Saturday, and maybe you can explain why not. Are you willing to do that now?
it's skipping and breaking up. So catch me at the end if I didn't answer it right, or if I didn't answer the question. I grew up protesting. That's how I came into air quality work and as a community organizer. And so tragedy that unfurled, that is the straw that broke the camel's back, that has moved our nation into such action, that alone, is enough to make, I hope, everyone want to stand up and stand together and have our voices heard. So yes, I want to be there, but Erin, as is now publicly being shared around the threats that the intelligence has been gathering, and the intent for few to make a different kind of a statement at these events was information that I was aware of, and it made a decision that I didn't want to detract or shift the focus of an event by perhaps calling that kind of attention. Also, I also didn't want to distract from the work of our police officers, who, if something did go wrong, would have to turn attention. Some of them would turn attention to protect me, and I am not the focus here. The focus is on the protest and the conversation that we are trying to have. So I am anxious to get out and be a part of the protest. And I saw that several Salt Lake City police officers took a knee with the protesters at the Public Safety Building on Monday night. The nights kind of blurred together, and I appreciate that. And I also know it's a personal decision for officers, that's a sacred move, and I don't think I should direct them to do so. I hope that they might be compelled in their hearts to do so, but that's a personal decision for them. So as this begins to settle out and the peace of the protests pervades, I look forward to joining you.
You referred to Chief Brown, and he made a claim over the weekend that out-of-state protesters were infiltrating, starting the violence, but the arrest records really don't bear that out. They show that most of them lived in Utah. What's the basis for his claim, his statement?
Yeah, I also heard the suspicions from the police department that there may be people of state who came in for certainly for the protest, but I think the concern was that some people may have come to incite violence. And I think it's fair to say that there were probably 1,200 people at that protest, give or take a few hundred, and there were 46 people arrested. I don't know that that they are necessarily a sample of everyone who was at the protest. I also, in my days of protesting and knowing some professional organizers, and I don't know that professional organizers go out to get arrested every single time. So I don't know that is necessarily a representative sample, and I don't know that it's therefore accurate to say that everyone at the protest was from Salt Lake City, and everyone who participated in the violence or the destruction was from Salt Lake City or Utah.
City Council met last night, and the vast majority of the comments overwhelmingly favored cutting the police department budget. What's your thinking on that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we know that there's a national trend right now with defund the police as a hashtag, and there's a lot of communication on that. It became very clear that there was a shared document, an outline that these speakers were working off of, and the $30 million number was a curious choice, and was never really quite explained why 30 million, but this is the flattest police budget in the time that I've been in City Hall, in 7 budgets. And the increases are associated with primarily with the contracts we have with the police union, and that's something we're obliged to pay. The other biggest one is from the insurance contracts that we have, and there's some premium increases there. And that's all, publicly available. The budget is online. You can go look at exactly down to the dollar what the police budget increase looks like and what they're asking for. There's also some decreases in there. So it was the longest council work session or formal meeting I think that may have ever happened. So congratulations on keeping the council and me there till 12:15 in the morning. But the message was pretty consistent from the beginning and remained that way throughout.
When you talk about budget, there's been this 1-2 punch, right? I mean, the pandemic and the protests. What cuts are going to have to be made to the city budget? Do you have a sense?
Sorry, there's a delay, and I want to say one other thing, if I may, about the people who commented. I was really impressed with the intelligent approach, the personal narrative that joined with the similar themes they brought. Everyone brought something that they personally wanted to see, and I really appreciated that. After sitting through hundreds, maybe thousands of public hearings, it was really impressive, and I implore them to stay engaged. There was a lot of misinformation, and I think the facts that they thought they knew. Stay engaged with us. Like, Salt Lake City wants this work. That you don't have to convince us that we have broken systems. We know we do. We want to do this work. So the potential in that room, that virtual room of all those people speaking, is enormous, and we want to keep working with you. But I think we need to sort out some of the details of what the facts are. And you had a question, Jennifer, now forgotten.
It's all right. You mentioned budget, and I know that with both the protests and the pandemic, Salt Lake City businesses are struggling, and Salt Lake City government is struggling. First, address the business community and what the city can do to help rebuild. And then next, just the impact on the city budget. Are cuts coming down the road?
I'll start with the budget, and then I'll go to the business community. For this budget, it is overall flat. We've predicted a decrease for the first and second quarter. And just for the listeners, we operate off of a fiscal year budget, not a calendar year budget. So July 1st is our first day of the 2021 budget. And so we're looking at a decrease until January 1 in our revenue. And then for Q3 and Q4, leading back through June of next year, we do anticipate a return to what we predicted pre-COVID might be our revenue streams. So overall, that levels out to flat. And when I came into office, we were looking at the biggest one-time revenue stream, unpredicted one-time revenue stream that we'd ever seen in the city. It was almost $10.5 million. And this is, as I said, one time. So it's permits, it's licenses, it's just growth in our city that's happening. And we were, it was very fortunate with the timing. So we socked away about $4 million so that Salt Lake City Corporation could not cut service, not cut programming, while keeping our employees safe. And we did have to make some changes, but we don't have any furloughs. We haven't laid anyone off. I don't anticipate having to do so, but this thing's not over. And so at this point, we're fairly stable compared to other cities who I know are looking at layoffs and have had to do some. To the business community, Salt Lake City was, the governor's office has told us we were the first city in the nation to do a small business emergency loan fund. We did $1 million. The council approved it unanimously, and we cranked that out to 52 businesses. These were $20,000 about. Some asked for less than that. And I'm looking into if we can transfer those loans, which are no interest, 5-year terms. They don't have to start paying them back until 3 months. We're on our ability to do so based on the federal dollars that are coming our way. And the government, they've been obviously through 3 pieces of legislation. They're working on a 4th right now. And it has been evolving in terms of the direction of how we can use those COVID assistance dollars from the feds. And they're giving cities more lenience, more leverage to do what we need to do and be less prescriptive from the beginning. So that's where we're working through whether or not we can transfer those loans, grants, and we would like to get more money out there to our small businesses. I don't know if business licenses we have in Salt Lake City, 90% of those are small businesses. So 50 employees or fewer. And we know
this technology is not our friend. I'm not going to keep you more than a couple more minutes. I just want to know about the pandemic. So Salt Lake City is still under an orange layer of restriction. We're hearing that the state is going to continue to ratchet down its restrictions for the coronavirus. I'm wondering if Salt Lake City plans to do the same as soon as this weekend.
We are in a conversation with the county health department even this afternoon, actually, to assess what our city's data is today. But so far, we have been basically the same as we were when we moved from red to orange. We haven't seen a dramatic decrease to any degree, especially in the 84116 zip code, which is our Glendale and Poplar Grove area of the city. But citywide, we are still the hardest hit in the state of Utah, and we're going to rely on the data and the public health department at Salt Lake County to help us determine when it's safe for Salt Lake City to transition. I'll hope to have an update for you in the next day or two.
Terrific. There was one other Facebook question, and I'm not finding it now, but the gist of it was, are you going to be meeting with people to talk about racism, to talk about not just leaders of various groups, but with the community at large, talk about excessive force? What are your plans in that regard to sit down with protesters and hear more about their concerns and move forward with a plan?
Yeah, I'm organizers of Monday Fest, even while the protest was going on, and I think that I know that we've made some contact, and that dialogue is the leaders in the Black community, so several of the elders in the community affecting change today, and met with also legislators of color that coming from a grassroots background of community organizing, the conversation really happens, the change happens. The change that happens at the legislative level and the policy level starts at the grassroots level. So yes, we are going to be having those conversations, and read my office, go to slc.gov. You can click on the mayor's office. The work must be done. And I want to mention, Jennifer, that we asked our city council in March to fund, even amid coronavirus, our citywide equity master plan. And they granted that funding to us. So we are in the early stages of getting a consultant, because no city should try to evaluate their own equity. That's not the way to do it. And I ask the people who are inspired today by what's going on to do the work, to stay with us and help us do the citywide equity master plan. Help us unpack how everything that we do, from the way we look to the money we distribute in the community, to where we zone affordable housing and where we don't. Help us do this work. We want to do it. We've got the funding to do this major plan for the city, and we want you to do it with us.
And the major thing right now on people's minds is law enforcement. I assume they've got a seat at the table. Yeah,
that's been ongoing for years. Utahns Against Police Brutality, Black Lives Matter, several other organizations have been meeting with the police on a monthly, sometimes bi-monthly basis. That's an open door meeting. It's not an organization where there's a chair and there's a hierarchy. the police are there to listen and answer questions. And we've been working with those organizations. We're going to continue working with the organizations. It is an open door conversation. And so I'll say in wrapping up that I think this is the most exciting time to be in elections. I'm so grateful, even through our trifecta of COVID and earthquakes and the violence that we saw in our streets this weekend. This is change. This is the time for change. This is why I ran for office, do this work, and the demand from our community to work and to make this happen is an incredible opportunity. So it's there's a lot of heartbreak. Really honored to be here to do it with you.
Mayor, thank you so much for the time. Please forgive us for the technical issues. We will work on that. But we really, really appreciate the perspectives that you've given today and hope that we can have you on again.
Thanks, Jennifer.
Stay safe. Mayor Erin Mendenhall was with us. Thank you so much for tuning in to Trib Talk today. Until next time, be well.